Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the Epic Narrative.
Welcome back. Listen, I that last episode, it just got long and kind of tangled a little bit, I think. There's so much crazy sexual stuff in there. It just it still, I was telling my wife about it after the recording. I was like, it's just not crazy, but it seems crazy to me that God had to be that specific. And that's one of the reasons why I look at those passages and I think Moses had something to do with this. Like, I think God was like, abstain from sexual immorality. Don't be like the culture of the Egyptians or that you left, or the culture of the Canaanites like you're going to. And Moses was like, got it. And then he started to think through, let's see, let me cover a little more specific than that. Like, I don't know. I got caught up in it. Sometimes that happens. You know that. I appreciate you guys sticking with me, and I hope it gave you an opportunity to at least discuss, some things, because we do get used to the culture we're in. And I'm not saying we don't influence it. I think we influence it by our mere presence. We carry the love of God within us, and we influence the culture because of that. I see that all the time in the groups of people that I hang out with, regardless of where I've been. I mean, currently we're, living in an RV park because that's my life right now. But I know that I know I influence. And sometimes the repercussions of that is, it seems like people don't want to hang out with us. And I don't mean that in a bad way. They're good people. They're nice people, easy to work with, all that kind of stuff. But when you look at what they are practicing, they know that we don't. And it's not like we made an announcement. As a matter of fact, sometimes my wife and I are like, why? What do they know about it? Like, nobody asks us any of these questions. But throughout general conversation, they know that we used to be working in the church, pastoring, etc. So I think that, of course, they have assumptions of what that means. And they also know that there's a good chance that we're not going to do drugs, which many of them do on a regular basis. And we're not going to drink. We do drink, but not to the level that they do. Like, they drink a lot more than us and stay up way late. I'm not staying up late. That has nothing to do with drinking or drugs. I just don't stay up late. And actually, I don't think I ever really have, even as a child. I remember, always went to bed early, got up early too. My mom, God bless her heart, had to deal with that, but she didn't have to deal with her son being up late because I just went to bed. It just the way it is. I remember being in high school. I was like the only one, it seemed like, in the world that hadn't seen Saturday Night Live. And I remember being, that was just back in my high school days. Saturday Night Live was like a really, really popular show, and it was on late on Saturday night. And then, I mean, it was years of internal battle to stay up long enough to watch the end of Law and Order. Law and Order came on at 9. And I really enjoyed the show at the time. And I know now it's on 24 hours, or at least currently at the time of this recording, it's on like 24 hours a day on some of these stations. But I cannot tell you dozens of times. I want to say hundreds, but dozens and dozens of times, I would wake up on the couch like at 10:15, and my wife's wide awake, and I'd be like, oh, how did it end? She'd be like, well, you went to sleep at 9:15. Do you want me to cover the whole show with you? I'd be like, no, I was dozing in and out. Like, I just closed my eyes during the commercials. And she'd look at me and go, okay. And she'd gracefully tell me how it ended so I could go to bed with some closure in my mind. Anyways, enough about me. I don't even know how that roll. How did I roll down that? Oh, I just think Moses sat there and was like, I need to be more specific. So he wrote down some somewhat experiences that he knew of, like circumstances he knew was behavior he knew was happening, sexual activity he knew was happening in the camp. And it just blows my mind. I just can't even put together how you get involved in that kind of sexual activity. So when I read these, chapter 19, and we're going to try and get to 20 as well, but chapter 19, it just is like, the various laws, like just a few more things. It's actually a lot of things, but we're going to look at them. But one of the things is that you'll notice is you'll see again a lot of times, death. They will, death will occur. If you don't do this, you'll die. Just remember that in that literary format, it's the same thing as saying the wages of sin is death. It's death always is what sin leads to. It's not that God is killing everyone who sins, and there's fair questions that come up when you talk with people who have walked away from the church or have walked away from God and the Bible. They just said, well, he doesn't kill everyone who sins. And it's like, you're right. Sin kills everyone who sins. That's the whole point. The wages of sin is death, not God. God is not the death monger. Someone sent me the other day a really, a good explanation from somebody, but of why God can kill you and bring tragedy and evil into your life. And I thought, what a sad, like they did I was not conflicted, but it was like they did a really good job of explaining it, illustrating it. They used, nature. And I was like, well, the person was like, what do you think? I'm like, well, I think they did a good job. Like their presentation was good, their illustration was good, but their premise was wrong. The premise was God kills. The premise was God brings evil. God can't do that. Not if he's all good. Not if he's all love, because if he can do that, that means that those things exist in heaven with the Creator. I can't land there. I used to, but I don't now. So when the verse 2, speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. So this little phrasing basically means this particular round of remembering some rules was probably done in a general assembly. Everyone was called. I'm guessing the people in the back were talking a lot. It probably was hard to pay attention. It also meant probably only the men showed up, not all the women and children, for a variety of reasons. But the elders and the leadership would have been kind of in the front row so that they made sure to hear everything so that they could repeat it back to everyone as they needed to hear it. But generally, this would be the whole assembly. And as they all assemble, it was to make it clear that these rules were not, first and foremost to the religious leaders, i.e. the Levites and Moses, but that all the people were expected to hear these laws, these rules, and live by them, because they're creating a new culture. Remember that this is stuff that they have boisterously, agreed to. We will do all that you say, all that the Lord says, we will obey. We will never deviate. Just don't make us talk to him. And Moses came down and he'd given the assembly there at the base of the mountain. He'd give them all that they needed to know from what he had spent time with God. And they were like, yes, we agree. And then he'd go back up the mountain, etc. Covered all that in season 3, but they were all like, yep, all right, let's go through this. And in everyone showing up there was a unity there. There was a unity that it wasn't like they just read the rules. They talked about them because as Moses would present these, it was the heart of these things were the culture shift. He's looking at him going, listen, this is not as easy as it sounds. And if all you do is obey the rules, like, you're missing the point. Because what we're trying to do is change a culture. We're coming from hundreds of years of slavery. And God really wants to see us move into a place of love. Move into a place where we make decisions from a new paradigm, a paradigm of love, a paradigm of hope, a paradigm of relational confidence with God, not a paradigm of rules and rule breaking, not a paradigm of tasks accomplished or tasks failed, not a paradigm of, is the master happy? Can I pacify him? Can I satisfy him enough that he doesn't kill me? These are not the destination that these rules were supposed to bring about. They're really just on-ramps to create an environment that, as God says, you be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. He's like, listen, the whole point of all these things I'm going to go over is this: you will become what God says you are, which is holy. These rules will be irrelevant when you understand your identity. My wife and I are in a long-term intimate relationship. I don't need rules to abide by in order to understand how to maintain that relationship and not ruin it and or to, end up divorced or separated. I operate from a place of relational confidence and love. And that's the place God wants you to operate from when you're with him. He wants you to operate from a place of relational confidence and love so that you will be holy just as he is holy. This is an encouraging word. This is a God being confident in them and their abilities to be and do all that he already sees them to be and are. Be and are. Bob, I'm sorry. I know, now I'm getting tongue-tied. But that's why it's on the front end of these rules. It's not, and I know a lot of evangelicals will get a little disconcerted if evangelicals would even listen to this podcast. I'm sure I would have lost them a long time ago when it comes to God not killing. But be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. He puts that at the front end of this list because he's like, that's how I see you. And it's not obeying the rules that will make you holy like me. It's being in relationship with me that will make you like me. And here are some rules that will give you kind of an on-ramp of behavioral expectation of what love behaves like. And he starts out with, each of you must honor and respect your mother and father. You must observe my Sabbaths. I'm the Lord your God. He's like, we're going to start with a relationship of the people who should be closest to you in your life, your parents. You need to respect them. You need to honor them. One of the biggest cultural shifts that will happen in the history of the Israelites is God is going to refocus everyone's attention back to the family. I know that there's a lot of people that get all freaky deaky about, the devil's trying to destroy the family, but they're not wrong. There's a reason why the family's attacked. It's because it's a place of cultural development. It's a place it should be a place of honor and love, two major characteristics of heaven. It's a big freaking deal. And so, yeah, the enemy goes after that. And then the next verse, do not turn to idols or make metal idols for yourselves. I am the Lord your God. When it says don't turn to idols, just as a phrasing, a literary phrase, it means to worship or or acknowledgement of other gods. And this is where it's, for me, it became interesting, right? The thought there is that other gods, right? There's these other gods. Well, what's wrong with studying them? What's wrong with reading about them? What's wrong with maybe going to a few classes to understand where they're coming from? Some of their teachers are really entertaining, and I enjoy listening to them. So I'm going to go to their temple. I'm going to hang out with them for a little bit. You know what? They're having my friends who are, they worship whatever, the sun god. They're having a party. I've been invited. I'm going to go over because, we're supposed to help them out. And if we don't go to their parties, then how are they supposed to come to ours? There's a lot here that's implicated in the phrase, do not turn to idols. And the concept here, I think, is that what Moses is trying to get across is if you start thinking about other idols and you start talking about them, you'll begin to not fear them. You'll begin to think they're no big deal. And you'll begin to ignore their influence that they put on your life and put on this culture. And you will celebrate with them and your newfound friends. And ultimately, you will become divided as to who God is. Now, remember, they're already starting from a place of pretty serious division. They're coming from years of hanging out in Egypt where, as we mentioned, I think last week, I think it was last episode, I get confused sometimes. But remember, they used to do little idol worships in the house, little altars in the house, little altars in the field, little altars along the road on a hard journey, little altars on the boat if you're in the ocean to keep the ocean calm. Like there were lots of places where idol worship would take place. It was seemingly no big deal. And what Moses is getting across in this list is, hey, listen, there's spiritual planes that are available, and some of them are pretty nasty and ugly. Some of those spiritual realms belong to the enemy, and when you just casually interact and become acceptable of those practices, you automatically give yourself opportunity to be influenced by those realms. I'm not saying, and I don't think Moses is either, that you never have a conversation with somebody who goes to a different church than you or has a different theology than you. That's not the point. The point is, don't turn toward those idols. Don't pursue them. When you turn towards something, right, your attention becomes pointed in a different direction. And he says, don't do it. It'll have impact. And I think some of this, we can see in the life of Jesus, because Jesus is the Word of God. Right? How do you develop a relationship and not participate in the culture of somebody who believes differently than you? And I think Jesus taught, remember, from these very laws, yet many people enjoyed hanging out with him. The stories of the two stories that involve, over 5,000 people are just that. They're just indications of the number of people that would follow Jesus. And there are a lot of reasons to follow Jesus. He brought love and hope and joy to circumstances that nobody ever expected, and he brought the idea and the beauty and the impact of a loving God to these laws that so many people were oppressed by. And that's why a lot of people think Jesus started a new covenant, one that, had never been seen before. But But that wasn't really what it was. Jesus expanded a covenant that was already there based on the character of God, and he was showing them who the character of God was. And he's like, he's not what you've all made him out to be in so many cases. He is not a killer. He takes care of people. He loves people, even if they don't agree with him. And that's what Jesus taught us, that there is a way to have relationship with people who do not worship the Father and not be influenced by their culture, not celebrate their culture. Not sometimes, it's some people say it's like they first there's an acceptance, like you have to accept other cultures, and it's like, well, then you have to tolerate what they're doing, and then you have to celebrate what they're doing. And then pretty soon it's like if you don't celebrate what they're doing, then you're the bad guy. And I think at some level Moses and God are trying to get across here, don't get sucked up in that trap. Don't go down that path. Stay above it. Stay in the kingdom of heaven. Just love them. And don't necessarily participate in the culture, because we're trying to give them a new culture to be a part of. Let's see. This new culture is, again, one that Jesus taught, right? A way to bring light and love and hope to a place that is hopeless and dark and filled with fear and filled with masters or other gods that needed to be appeased. Jesus was like, we're bringing a whole new concept to this world, and you're part of it. And you can't be a part of it by also being a part of them in that manner, because you'll become divided, and then you won't be able to tell it apart. And then they'll be like, well, hey, I tolerate and celebrate you, and you tolerate and celebrate me, and we're all the same. And just be careful. Just be careful, because we're drawing people into a realm where God loves them. And again, this can be hard to differentiate, because it sounds like you're saying, God, we're going to bring them in, but God loves and accepts everyone. He does, but he calls them up to a higher spiritual plane. Remember, all the offerings were about coming higher to a different spiritual level. Not staying where you are. All right. Let's see. Enough on that. Verse 5, when you sacrifice fellowship offering to the Lord, sacrifice it in such a way that it will be accepted on your behalf. It shall be eaten on the day you sacrifice it, or on the next day. Anything left over until the third day must be burned up. If any of it is eaten on the third day, it is impure and unacceptable. Remember, we talked about this, episodes ago, how it was imperative that you didn't keep food hanging around, even though it might have been delicious at the time of the offering. Eat it that day, and if you get really full, you can eat it the next day, but do not keep it around for a third day. One, that means that you're kind of hoarding things and trying to provide for yourself, and two, you can get some little micro nastiness in there, and it can cause yourself to get pretty sick. So let's get rid of it. Let's see. I'm going to jump down to verse 11. Do not steal. Do not lie. Do not deceive one another. Stealing and lying, don't. But the idea, again, is the idea of stealing also meant being silent, avoiding situations where you might, where you might be called on to be a witness. Stealing meant making an oath and then knowing you weren't gonna fulfill your end of it. That was stealing and lying. That was, in essence, being silent could be a form of either one of those. Pretending you don't know what happened when you do know what happened. You just don't want to get involved. That's what that phrasing was referring to. Let's see, verse 14. Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind. That's just rude. But fear your God, I am the Lord. That's my gosh. Don't take advantage of the blind and deaf. He's like, take care of people. Don't take advantage of them. Don't mock them. Don't pretend that somehow you're better than them because you have some physical ability that they seem to have lost. Don't play with that. Don't play. Verse 15. Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. See, many times justice gets perverted when it becomes a place where people believe we need to balance everything out. We need to balance out wealth. We need to balance out privilege. We need to balance out racial inequality, social inequality. However you look at it, the justice system is not designed for that. Honestly, the worship of God is designed for that. And that's, I think, what God is trying to focus on. Listen, you guys need to focus on me. You guys need to worship me. You need to bring the culture of me to this earth, because in doing so, you will draw all men to me, which will bring unity and justice, both social, racial, ethical, financial. All of that happens when you focus on me, because I am those things. You cannot pervert your justice system into a system that you think will bring about some form of justice, equality in those areas. Justice is by design to remain impartial regardless of what's going on. And I have little doubt that many people could discuss the justice systems of various countries. I'm currently in the United States, so we could discuss all the ways that our justice system has been influenced away from justice and into some form of, weaponry. That's harsh. A tool to bring about the goals of somebody else, whether it's society or leadership or whatever. All right, verse 18. And again, you can read this chapter. It's filled with stuff. I'm not reading every single rule. Verse 17, do not hate a fellow Israelite in your heart. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you will not share in their guilt. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's been around a long time, even before Jesus. So it says, love your neighbor as yourself. The same degree of success for us and for others, the same degree of success and respect, the same degree of honor. You need to join in their joy and join in their pain. That's what all that means. Connection, relationship. You don't want to hold back your love and your kindness because you think that they're more blessed than you. You think, well, they don't need mine. They don't. And then you don't get jealous of them, looking at them, going, well, why didn't the Lord bless me like that? It's a beautiful thing when you love your neighbor as yourself. It's a huge cultural shift. It'll change the paradigm of an entire nation, but it starts with your neighbor. It starts that small. It starts with the person you share a house with, the person you share a roadway with, a driveway with, a hallway with. These are your neighbors. I talked about it, and I often do. I think a lot of churches don't bless their neighbors. Their literal neighbors kind of wish the church wasn't there because whatever, parking on Sunday or the noise or the obnoxious displays that go up, whatever. Like, we should be blessing our neighbors. Uh, Again, the Lord says, keep my decrees, which doesn't mean, uh, what it means is develop this culture. It doesn't mean keep the rules. It means develop the culture. All these are good. I mean, honestly, I could read through this probably for an hour and just comment all the way through, but I don't want to do that. I want you guys to read these things. Verse 28, do not cut your bodies for the dead or put a tattoo marks on yourself. Oh, no tattoos? What? But I want a tattoo. I really do. I've always wanted one. Got married really young and really thought, I'll get a tattoo later. And my wife said, absolutely not. She's like, nope. For years, it was just a dead no. She did not want me to get tattoos. And part of it was she kind of knew the type of person I was. I would just keep getting tattoos because I think creatively. I get excited. I'm a little bit spontaneous and impulsive, especially back in the day. So some of it was just like, I don't want to marry. I don't want a husband who has those. That's all. And you're my husband, so you're not getting them. And I rolled with that. I really did. And now she's like, if you really want to, you can go get it. And I think, well, that's not really permission. If you want to, go ahead. Okay, honey, I won't. No, really, it's fine. Go ahead. Okay, well, I'm choosing not to at this point. But anyway, sorry. I don't think it's not what I meant. It's not what's meaning in the verses. Basically, cutting your body and making tattoos as a sign of mourning someone's death is what's being referred here. Do not cut your bodies for the dead or put a tattoo marks on yourself. So a lot of times, and I know that happens today. Someone dies and they tattoo their face on their bodies, on the survivor's body somewhere. And God's like, that's not the culture we're trying to develop here. We're developing a culture of life. And I don't want you marking up your body as a memorial to death. That's not what we celebrate. It's not that you don't mourn people who die. God is not saying, don't you dare, mourn people who die. You need to be appropriate and you need to be honoring and respectful, but there's no need to memorialize a death on your body. Now, I'm not saying if you have a tattoo, you're in sin. That's not God. No, stop. That's the enemy talking to you. It just means it is what it is. God's forgiveness is amazing. His goodness overrides all this. It's fine. You'll be fine. And it's, you did what you believed was the right thing to do, and you still maybe truly believe it's the right thing to do, and I'm not going to convince you otherwise. I'm not trying to. Just find it an interesting verse. I don't know what their bodies look like. I don't know how deformed or whatever that they would make their bodies as a sign of what do I want to say? Mourning. But God's like, you don't have to. You don't have to. 31. Do not turn to mediums or seek out spiritualists, for you will be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. These are just types of magical sorcery and in some cases pharmaceutical studies. It doesn't say don't ever come against them, come across them. It doesn't say, you're not allowed to walk into a store where these things are. He's like, just don't pour your life into them. Don't spend valuable time exploring what they have to offer. Stick with me. God is supernatural. I think in a lot of ways, a lot of churches have lost the incredible spiritual power of God, and it has made the spiritual power of the enemy more attractive because it's like, well, look at what I possibly could do if I studied this. We need to study the power and amazing supernatural giftings of God that he brings to the earth. Jesus had them, and he left them here for us. And part of that is, I do think we do need to study the stars. We need to know those things that are in creation. We need to study the cycles of life, the frequencies of sound and of light, and how they impact creation. We need to study things of magnetism and of light. It's all these things are powerful, amazing things that God created, but that doesn't mean that you also need, that. Well, I shouldn't say this. It doesn't mean. Unfortunately, a lot of those things have been studied by magical sorcerers because they understand their power, and Christians have gotten so afraid of them that now they're all evil. They're not all evil. He's saying, I'm the Lord your God. Keep me as your focus if you want to delve into these things. I mean, years later, right? We'll study, years from now, we'll study Daniel. Daniel knew the stars. Daniel taught the stars and that whole system to a whole culture of wise men in Babylon, so much so that years later, people who studied the things that Daniel left behind for them to study recognized the signs in the stars to go find Jesus. Don't be afraid of this stuff. Just be alert. Focus on God. Let's see. 35 and 36. Do not use dishonest standards when measuring length, weight, or quantity. Use honest scales, honest weights, and honest ephod. And honest hin. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt. Keep all my decrees and all my laws and follow them. I am the Lord. He's like, listen, you learned some pretty good tricks back in Egypt. You were probably forced to use them by the Egyptians. Don't. Use the things that I gave you. Follow my culture of love and honesty. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. Change the culture. Follow my decrees. All right. I'm trying to see. I had spent 38 minutes. Is this going to be another long one? Yeah, let's go for it. All right, chapter 20. It's not a lot of depth. Chapter 20, verse 2. Say to the Israelites, any Israelite of any foreigner in Israel who sacrifices any of his children to Moloch is to be put to death. The members of the community are to stone him. I myself will set my face against him. I will cut him off from his people. For by sacrificing his children to Moloch, he has been defiled. My sanctuary has profaned my holy name. All right. So Moloch, right? We talked about him last episode. He's a huge influence in the culture that they're going into. And as an idol, their religion basically demanded generational dedication through symbolisms of passing through the fire, passing through the blood, and that was demanded. So it wasn't you couldn't have very easily, you could not have like a casual connection to somebody who also worshiped Moloch, because they were going to want you to participate deeper and deeper and ultimately dedicate you and your family and generations of your family to Moloch. This is where God is trying to let them know, listen, if you do these kind of sacrifices, it's all about generational connection to this God. They want your children and their children's children, because these generational dedications would also, in essence, result in generational curses, generational by the spiritual beings. He would continue. I will set my face against him and the family and cut him off from their people altogether. I will set my face against anyone who turns to mediums, spiritualists, to prostitute themselves and follow them. I will cut them off. Consecrate yourself, be holy. Keep my decrees, follow them. So he's moving through this basically saying, my culture cannot tolerate you dedicating your family to the family of Moloch. Sexual immorality, all tied into this. Family sexual immorality, all tied into this. All tied into the dedication to Moloch. Child sacrifice, yeah. But at least child dedication for sure through symbolic activity. And a lot of times that also involves sexual activity with priests, with priestesses, with in the presence of the idol. It's deep. It goes a long way, and you can listen to a lot of people talk about it. It's well documented. But these type of activities were very common in the culture of Egypt and in Canaan. And God wants them to separate the family and be drawn together as a family. Remember to honor each other, to respect one another, to create a different worldview so that, unlike worshiping a Moloch where your family was dedicated to other beings and other priests and could be used in any way necessary. God's like, I want you to be dedicated to each other and to me. And we want to create a nation of goodness, a nation of honor, a nation of respect for your neighbor, for your body, for your sexual activity. I want it all to look different because one of the characteristics of the enemy are fear and desperation and rejection and slavery. And I want them to look over to the nation of Israel, my nation, and say, wow, they are a nation of love and of respect and of honor. And they take care of one another. And they trust their God to provide. They don't hoard things. I mean, we can go back to that whole law of the year of Jubilee, where all the property and loans are returned. I mean, it's mind-blowing how different the Israelites were going to be. He's like, I can't have you doing and loving and being a part of Moloch. I believe Moses believed that it was worthy of a death penalty, and that's what he wrote in there. I think God understood that if you follow these rules, if you follow Moloch, you will die because the wages of sin is death. I think Moses wanted to put an end to it quickly. He didn't want people following Moloch for years and then ultimately dying. He wanted it to happen sooner than that. And he thought that the principle of God was close enough. It's not an easy conversation. I know that. I don't mean to be flippant with it, but I also don't want to spend spend a whole lot of time on it, because we could be here for days. And I'll go all the way to the end of this chapter. He says, "You are to be holy because holy to me. You are to be holy to me because I, the Lord, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to be my own. A man or a woman who is a medium or spiritualist among you must be put to death." In other words, they will die because they are connected to an evil realm that loves to bring death. Their blood will be on their own heads. They've made their choice. They keep choosing to be part of a sinful nature, and it will bring about death. If you're in a good relationship with God, you're going to hear from God directly in the spiritual realm. You don't need to pursue sorcery and witchery and drugs in order to hear from God. God will speak to you, And God is looking to grow a family that will speak to him, that will have conversation with him. That'll be much different from the other cultures that you are walking away from. Because you'll be free from the dark masters, and you will walk into a realm of light and joy. Your conversations will bring about life, not death, will bring about hope, not fear. He's contrasting what he brings to that of the life if you follow Moloch, which will be, like I said, a culturally it's a high pressure thing not to do it. And he keeps warning them, follow my decrees. Change the paradigm, and everyone will be of better favor, including the nations around you. Everyone will be blessed. That was the promise to Abraham in the first covenant. The whole nation, the nations of the world will be blessed because of you and your family. This is God's continuous goal. It was his goal in the first covenant. It's his goal in the second covenant, because his character never changed. He has been good. He has always been good. And he will continue to be good. And with that, I'm going to say good night, everyone, or at least good day. Hope you have a fabulous one. I look forward to seeing you next week on The Epic Narrative.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob Thoughts.
All right, thanks so much for hanging out. I listened to that was another one where I remember recording that. That was a little while ago, and there's so much in those chapters that I didn't have a good roadmap visually for me to kind of move from one thing to another, because, well, obviously I didn't have a good roadmap. I don't know why, but anyways, I appreciate you guys sticking with it all the way to the end. And I wanted to go back to something I said early on in this episode where I talked about not studying, reading, participating in the culture of and philosophies of the world, religions, such as, for them it would have been Moloch and some Asherah poles and that sort of thing. And I'm listening to myself, and I'm like, what were you thinking, Bob? Because you read that kind of stuff all the time. You read archaeology books, and you read history books, and you read religious books to gain more flow and depth into the culture of the day and what was influencing things that were being written, etc. Like how are you any different? And I thought, man, that's a really good point, Bob. I don't know why my engineer didn't step in and stop me and say, you want to explain yourself a little better there, Robert? So I really think it comes down to a couple things. One would be your identity. When you roll in confidence of who God's made you to be, that you are a child of God, that you are loved by him, that your identity and purpose come from him, then I do believe that you have the ability to interact with, we'll call it darkness, and not be impacted by it, because you're bringing light. Now, if all you do is hang around darkness and you don't maintain and continue to grow and journey in your identity and passion with God, darkness will influence you. It's the nature of that realm. Light also influences you. So you need to be wise, and not just go out of rebellion, which I think a lot of people get involved in the various religions and philosophies and stuff out of rebellion. It's like, hey, the church didn't come through for me. The pastor hurt me, which unfortunately that's another whole rabbit hole of the church and the pastors do hurt people. I guess I want to acknowledge that. I'm not trying to pretend that doesn't happen. It does. But when you enter into the darker realms, when you enter into religions and philosophies and idol worships, if you want to call it that, and you do so out of rebellion, you're automatically entering into these things with a heart that's already bent toward what comes out of darkness, right? Rebellion.
So we just you have to be careful. That's all. And I believe I am careful. And yeah, and I have some accountability to keep that true. But I guess when I heard it, I thought I can't pretend that I don't read these things. I do, and make it sound like it's something you're never allowed to do. It's not a never allowed to thing. It's make sure that your source of strength and discernment comes from a place of light. And if you do get invited to a whatever party of something, it's not an automatic no, but you have to again probably put up some boundaries, make sure that you have some safety, because you don't want to get involved in a religious ceremony where you're starting to make commitments or reciting things that either you don't understand or you don't know what you're opening yourself up to. So, hey, just be careful out there. That's all. Just be careful. Good grief, Robert. See, so many things. So many things. Can you imagine Moses? You know, he gets these inspirational revelations from the Lord and he starts writing, and then he just starts writing, and then he keeps writing. And it's like, when do you stop? When do you stop making the rules? When do you stop with the specifics? And it's not an easy task, because his passion, his heart was to see the heart of God and the desire of God for a nation to follow after him. And he wanted that to happen. And he's looking at his people and he says, I believe they need more than just what you're giving me. You know, you've inspired me, and now I'm going to give you more, give them more, coming out of a good place. But I think much like me in this moment, like you just kind of get on a roll and you just keep spouting off more things to do and be careful of and don't do. But the other key thing I do hope you walk away with is that phrase where when you hear somebody say, if they do this, they will surely die. If they don't do this, they will surely die. Just remember that that's the phrase. The wages of sin is death. It's a very general term. It is not a specific term of God's got his thunderbolt and he's ready to sling it. All right. I just want you to hang on to that. You guys are awesome. I'll see you next week. I look forward to it, as always, on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.